Hello everybody and welcome to the first one of my 2025 recap videos. We got a new background, we got a new backdrop. This is my new bookshelf which has all my unread books in it. I kind of missed the old book pile already, but it's nice to finally have a real bookshelf and to be able to fit all my books on a shelf somewhere. So I'll probably show you some little intro sequence of me assembling and reorganizing. This is either gonna be an intro or an intermission. I just went to the furniture house and bought a new bookshelf, which is probably out of frame, but yeah, it's like a big ass bookshelf which I bought with my Christmas money, and this backdrop is gonna change dramatically. I'm gonna basically, at this point, I kind of like the pile aesthetic, but if I read the books, I have nowhere to put them. So I need a new shelf, and I bought one, and I'm gonna put it up right here. And if it's interesting enough, then maybe I'm gonna film some of it. I don't know. I like watching some of that stuff, so we'll see. Okay, the recording is really dark. I hope I can kind of improve it later on. This is the shelf. It's very big. It's taller than me. This took me quite a while. I have some pieces left over, which is never a good sign, but who cares? The real piece of work is gonna be putting all of these out of the way. I don't really know how I'm gonna do that yet. Okay, this is kind of the setup I have now. I wanted to put the big one here, but it didn't fit the way I thought it would because it doesn't go quite flush with the wall. Otherwise everything would have worked. But I don't mind it like this. I think this looks nice. I got an empty shelf here. I got all my books kind of a little bit more in one place, which I like. My unread books filled up all the shelf space except for the very top one. And yeah, this plant is kind of a bit in the way now. I'll see what I'll do about that. Maybe I'll put it somewhere else. And yeah, this is gonna be, with some slight changes, probably the new setup, the new background. So better get used to that. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I'm very, very happy to have this. I'm glad to finally have a proper bookshelf that's not just these weird boxes with the piece of wood on the bottom so I can't put the books in all neat. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching this weird little intermission thing, and see you in whatever is coming after this. And yeah, right now I'll just show you every single book that I read this year, which is about 104 books I read. I'm gonna put them all on the floor and I'm gonna rank them one by one. This is gonna be a long video, but it's gonna be great fun. Let me tell you, this was quite a workout. So I made 3 piles. This is rereads in chronological order. This is all the non-fiction I read, and this is all the fiction I read. So that was actually quite physically exhausting. I should have expected that. And now I'm gonna put them all. I'm gonna leave these in chronological order. I'm gonna arrange these and this big ass pile by my rating, so from least favorite to favorite. Alright. Whew, this is already taken quite a long time. It took more than 20 minutes to organize these. I don't know if I'm perfectly in frame because there's books everywhere, but it's also kind of nice to have books everywhere, to be surrounded by what I read. So let's start with the stuff that I didn't like. which I don't really have any of them here anymore. I gave all the books I didn't like away. And I don't think I'll make the effort and put in a thumbnail here because I don't like the books and I don't recommend them. So I don't, I'm too lazy to do that. Deal with it. I'm gonna go through them quite quickly. The first book I did not like, my lowest rated book this whole year, is Wozu Lyrik heute by Hilde Domin, which is a writer and a philosopher and various other things that she is, that one of my professors really loved, and she highly recommended this book to us, and it took me about 5 years to pick it up. And it was just a jumbled academic mess. It's one of those books that you can only understand if you have like 2 degrees and you know as much about the topic as the person writing it. And I hate those kind of books, I really do. It's you're writing for such a tiny group of people that even me as an academic cannot fucking understand what's going on. I'm surprised that I even finished it. But yeah, if you like boastful blatherings of a blatant bitch. No, I shouldn't say that. Don't recommend. Then the next book I did not like was Britt Marie Was Here by Frederik Backman. I went through this already. It just felt kind of shallow. It felt kind of predictable. I did not like the main character at all, and I feel like it works on you sympathizing with the main character. We'll go through them quickly. The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird. Pretty interesting book, but I didn't like the Scientology advertisement. And the Salmon Who Wanted to Swim to the Stars by Ando Hyun. Pretty cool concept, kind of Richard Bach, what's his name? Jonathan Livingston Seagull like, but I didn't like, why do the fish talk about the moon landing and about chainsaws? I did not like that. Alright, let's go through them quickly. Oh yeah, we're going into the books that I did not hate, but also didn't really like. The first stack. And a lot of these are not bad books by any means. For a lot of them are just, for example, The Seagull. Is it called The Seagull in English? Or The Dove? By Anton Chekhov. It's not that this was bad by any means. I just really I could not really get into it. And then it was over. This is definitely... I read The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov and I loved it. So I think this, I should probably reread this at some point. But I think I'm fine with waiting a few years. Then, Herr Paloma by Italo Calvino. I barely remember this book, to be honest. This is, I think he wrote some pretty good books. I read 2 novels of his, and this is his attempt at short stories, and I don't think it works very well. Kanaminato Confessions, praised as one of the most disturbing books ever. I thought it was very lame. The mass market look does it justice. It's just a fucking normal ass book, which I'm thinking about giving it away. I'm never gonna reread this. I don't think it was. I mean, it was pretty dark. It had pretty dark topics, but it didn't. I thought it was kind of boring. City of Glass by Paul Auster. This was more weird than I thought it was gonna be, and I should expect that because in this series, which I have quite a few of, the selection of books that are in there are quite weird and quite postmodern. This wasn't bad, but if someone will give me the second part of this, I think there's a trilogy, I will read this, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to get it, Oh, he writes himself as a character and kind of portrays himself as like a really cool dude. That was kind of weird. The Acacia by Claude Simon. I really expected to like this, but I couldn't deal with all the postmodern experimental stuff. I think this is something that if I ever read some other Claude Simon stuff, I was recommended The Flanders Road. This is something that I might come back to once I'm more acquainted with his style of writing. This reminded me a little bit of the really experimental Garcia Marquez novels, like The Autumn of the Patriarch. It is that confusing. You don't really know who's narrating. You have time chronological jumps all the time. Not a bad book, just went a bit over my head. The Aeneid by Virgil. Definitely a cool story, a very important story, and a cool historical, piece of writing. But the translation I had was so old that I had trouble even understanding anything that happens. It's written in verse, and translating verse, you lose a lot of meaning there. I think I'd prefer a translation that's not written in verse. You have all these fight scenes, and and then someone dies, and you don't even know who died and who killed who. That happened to me quite a few times. Mercury by Anna Kavan, one of my favorite writers. Ice, which is common in my reread video. This was kind of the first draft. I don't know if she really wanted this to be published, because it was released posthumously. It reads like a first draft for Ice. Ice is way better than this, and I think everybody knows it. But yeah, definitely interesting. The Stories of Jacob, first part of a quadrilogy by Thomas Mann, which I talked about plenty of times already, but I finally started reading. The first half of this was boring as fuck. Thomas Mann is very, very good at writing really boring stuff. Thinking about, I rated the Buddenbrooks like way higher. I don't know if that is really correct. The second part of this was quite enjoyable to read. I really enjoyed the last 200 pages or so of this. It's a retelling of the of the story of Joseph and his ancestors from the First Testament. And then last on this tier is Call of the Wild by Jack London, which I think is a great novella. I just didn't like the animal violence. That's the only reason. I'm very squeamish when it comes to that. I can handle violence against humans, but violence against animal, I hate. And that's the reason it's so low. Otherwise, it's a great book. Alright. Oh my god. Oh no. I can sit a little bit further back now. So, Brighton Rock by Graham Greene, another example of a book that I could acknowledge was very well written, but I just couldn't get into it for some reason. I will reread this definitely at some point. I could tell it was great writing. I was just not in the headspace to really kind of get into it. Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman. A very long short story collection by Murakami himself. Some of the stories were amazing, but you could have easily scrapped half of the stories. Some of the stories were like offensively bad, like they were shit. They read like a third grader wrote them, but some of the stories were pretty good. So yeah, that's it. This guy can write whatever he wants at this point, he's so famous. He can like write a shopping list and people are gonna buy it. And honestly, I am probably gonna buy it too. Clarice Lispector. That's my attempt of pronouncing her name correctly. The Lady and the Monster. This was my first Lispector, I think. And I don't think it was a great place to start, because this is her Juvenilia. This is it's a pretty cool collection. It's the very first stories that she ever wrote when she was 16, and the very last stories she wrote in her life. And honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing, the kind of depth and the kind of thought she puts into that. Like, she was a child when she wrote this, and it's definitely for fans. I would highly recommend this, but I don't think it was a great place to start. Words of the Magician by Hermann Hesse. This is just kind of like a random ass collection with like a lot of aphorisms and poems and excerpts, and it's something. If you're a hardcore fan, like I guess I am, then it's worth reading for sure. But if you're not a hardcore fan, I don't think you should pick this up. This is just gonna be confusing. Excuse me. The General in His Labyrinth by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is very much quite different from what he usually writes, because this is kind of, I guess, historical fiction, more or less. This is telling the story of Simon Bolivar, which is someone that I never really heard about, but is actually quite a famous figure, and he's kind of retelling, it's kind of like a fictional biography almost, and there's no magical realism, and I thought it was a bit long. It's not that long. It's about 350 pages. It looks bigger, but I think it could have done with like 100 pages less, and it would have given me the same amount of enjoyment. What do you have here? Heimsuchung by Jenny Appenbeck. This is, I read Kairos last year, and I very, very much liked it. I thought it was amazing. And so I had very high expectations. A lot of books coming up were me having too high expectations. This was a cool concept. It's kind of narrated like this is about a house that a lot of different people live in over the times. I thought it felt a bit rushed. It could have been longer, in my opinion, and really, I didn't feel like I had time to really acquaint myself with all the people living in the house. But a cool concept for a book, and maybe something that I reread. Oh, coming up, the most overhyped book of the last couple of years, in my opinion, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is a book, as you all will well know, has been absolutely everywhere. But I think it was one of the most overhyped things that I've ever read in my life. I really think, I did an in-depth review in one of my videos, which if I feel like doing that, I'll put it up right here. I don't remember. I think it's in the September one. I don't know. Well, I don't think the characters they didn't feel realistic in my opinion. I think this book has a ton of flaws. It's not a bad book. I finished it. That's saying something already. I didn't dislike it. But yeah, I think some of the things that happened, some of the character development just felt, I don't know, like kind of a tearjerker kind of thing, but not in a good way. And had I been a Booker Prize judge, I would have not shortlisted this. I liked her other book, The People in the Trees. I liked way more than this. But if she writes another book, I'm gonna get it, She's a cool writer. And that's enough said, I think. I put this one quite high. I think the World Dancer by Matthias Lampe. This is like an indie published book from a writer that lived like around where I used to live. And he kind of, this was a cool story, but if you want to publish an independent book, especially this is quite good quality. Spend some money to get an editor, man. This was in desperate need of an editor. This needed more chapters. This needed like a spelling check. This needed a lot of things, but it was still not a bad story. The Murder of a Buttercup by Alfred Döblin. I only remember a single story of this short story collection, but the one that I remember is one of my favorite short stories of all time. The Murder of a Buttercup. Definitely a cool writer. I have some more of his books that I haven't read yet. We'll check him out. Definitely an interesting guy. Mother Courage, Mutter Courage und ihre Kinder by Bertolt Brecht. I think this last year I had like a Bertolt Brecht year almost. This year I think this is the only one of his books I read. I think this is kind of a story that you kind of need to read over and over and over again, you know? Which a lot of people have to do in school and they hate it. But this is kind of an anti-war story. And I think I need to read this at least a couple more times before I can really like grasp it. But it's not hard to understand or anything. It's just something that I think you kind of could meditate on a little bit, you know? The Wall by Marlene Haushofer. This is a book that is more popular than I realized it was at the time that I read it. It's quite famous actually, and I liked it. But I don't know. It's not that long. It's about 260 pages, or exactly 260 pages. I thought it was a bit too long. I think it would have worked better as a novella. Scrap 50 pages or 100 pages, and there really was not a lot happening in this book, but you could kind of argue that that's the whole point of it, you know? It's about this woman trapped behind an invisible wall, and she cannot escape, and she's like all isolated and stuff. It's definitely a really, really cool book. But yeah, I was kind of conflicted because there's really not a lot of stuff happening, and usually I like that, but for this one I wasn't too sure. The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. I was thinking when I put the shelf up yesterday, this is all my unread books. This is kind of my entire library, you know, as Umberto Eco would call it. This is the best kind of library, the library where you haven't read anything. Yeah, Umberto Eco, fascinating individual. I would like to learn more about him and read more of his stuff. But this, it's, you know, it was alright. And I don't think it was any more than that, but also not any less than that. This is kind of the middle ground here, you know? Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. And then, I didn't review this yet. The Invention of the Red Army Fraction by a Manically Depressed Teenager in the Summer of 1969. This book reads exactly as the title. And the back here someone calls it a megalomaniac novel, and I think that is already the perfect way to describe it, you know? It's a postmodern encyclopedic novel. It's 800 pages. It's kind of like, it gives kind of Günter Grass vibes a little bit, and I was thinking that in the beginning, and towards the end he kind of makes like a wave towards him. He talks about Cat and Mouse that he had to read in school apparently. This blends like autofiction and fictional biographies, and this is a lot about growing up in West Germany and puberty and this time where there were terrorists, and it was, you know, politically quite tense in some ways. And he kind of, man, how do I even start? This is another one where I don't even know how to really review it. This has so many different aspects. Yeah, it has all these fictional biographies. Some of these I googled because they felt so real, but they were not by real people. Then it has fictional biographies by the members of the terrorist organization, but they're made up. They're real people, but made up biographies. It goes a lot into Catholicism and Christianity. It's really like a voice of the Beat Generation. It has this long paragraph where it kind of interprets religious meanings into Beatles lyrics, which is kind of funny and also kind of interesting. Yeah, it switches between autofiction, metafiction. Yeah, also then you have an unreliable narration sometimes. Then it's kind of framed by this. Yeah, you're not really sure. It's kind of a therapy session, but also kind of an interrogation. It's a lot of things at once. I like this. I think it could have, you know, this didn't need to be 800 pages. This could have been 600 or 500, and I think that would have been enough. The last 200 pages were kind of a drag to get through, but this was a great book nonetheless. And I really do recommend this, though. Well, let me start that again. I really only recommend this to people who know quite a bit about German history, because if you're not, if you don't really know anything about like post-war Germany, West Germany, East Germany, those tensions that you had there, then you're not really gonna get anything from this. This is quite a political book in a fictional way, but I'm very glad I read this. Took me almost all month to read. This took me like 3 weeks of reading only this every day, but I'm glad I went on that journey, and I think that's enough said. Ugh, my voice is already strained a little bit, and we have so much to get through. This is like a third. Alright. Next up, Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I really felt the desperate urge, I think I read this in the springtime, of reading like a big ass fantasy tome, because I used to do that as a child and a teenager, and I haven't done that in many, many, many years. And this concept it's like about ships that come alive, and it's a very complicated system, and that intrigued me. It's very immersive, this kind of stuff, and I really wanted to immerse myself in one of those fantasy worlds again. And what better way to do this with a big tome like this? And Robin Hobb was a writer that I heard about many times, and I don't really read fantasy, so I've never read anything by her. But yeah, apparently it's this big interconnected universe. I think her books are all set in the same world. She has like one about like assassins something, and that's also like in the same world as this. And I will say, this really did do quite a lot of things to me. One of those villains in the book, I felt like a very physical, real reaction. Like I was getting so tense, and I could not stop reading. This is an experience that I don't really get with other genres, but I'm still not gonna continue it, because it's, I don't know, I do feel like I did get something out of it when it comes to like how to write worlds and characters. I think the characters were written quite well, and the character development, but it's just not my genre, and that's fine. I'm really glad I read this anyway. I think you should always have like a wide horizon of genres to read, and it was an enjoyable experience. That's enough. Der Geschmack von Apfelkern, The Taste of Apple Seeds by Katharina Hagener. This was a book that I randomly found on the free bookshelf without knowing anything about it, and I picked it up, and it was pretty cool. It's like a family story, I guess, kind of like a family saga. And in the beginning, there's quite a bit of magical realism, so that's two things that I very much enjoy in a book. But it kind of dropped that element completely towards the end, which I thought was a little bit weird, that it did that. I think that, it didn't even feel like it was intentional. It just kind of stopped. And yeah, I think a family saga, if you write a magical realist family saga, I don't think it should be any less than 500 pages. I want to get into it. A lot of people hate that genre, but I love it. And I think this should have been a lot longer. And I already kind of forgot most of the plot points. And But probably a cool author. If I ever come across one of her other books, I might read it. Georges Simenon. This was actually quite a cool one. Georges Simenon was like prolific as hell. He wrote like a couple hundred books. How many did he write again? He wrote so many books. It took him like 2 weeks to write a book, and he published like crime novels, and this was one of them. And it was, this was another case of well, I just found this edition and I picked it up and I thought, yeah, man, I don't really read crime novels, and I don't really see why, because this was really cool and also like really funny in some ways. Um, and yeah, the title does not relate to the book in any way at all. But I guess if you read so many books, you need to come up with a lot of titles, and don't not all of them make sense. But this was great fun. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is a book written about an autistic teenager, which I think it did a marvelous job at writing a realistic portrayal of an autistic person. I think that was done very, very well. But I think this is another case of a book that was super overhyped. Some people called it the best book of the year it was written in, which I don't. I think it was like early 2000s. It was not bad by any means, but I think it didn't do the hype justice, at least for me. It's a great book. It's kind of funny. It's kind of dark. It's like English humor. And it's also kind of tragic with this autistic teenager that really cannot understand the world around him. It's kind of a nice blend of like being really tragic and also kind of lighthearted and funny and serious. It's a cool book, but yeah, whatever. Der Trafikant, The Tobacconist by Robert Seethaler. He's kind of like, for me, he's like similar to Katharina Hagener, where I wish his books were just a bit longer. This was such a cool story. This is about a young man, or like a teenager, going out into the city of Vienna and kind of starting his adult life at the dawn of the Second World War. With all the Jews get not really persecuted yet, but fleeing and stuff, and he befriends Sigmund Freud. But yeah, I think this was over a bit too soon. I think this should have been 200 more pages, and I would have given this a way better rating. But yeah, I read another book of his, which was kind of the same thing. I really hope he writes a long one. I would read that immediately. Yeah. And yeah, in this a lot of books that I liked, but I there's like, in my opinion, something that I didn't like, one element that I didn't like, and it was the same for this one, The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. This is quite long. It's over 500 pages, and the first 200 pages are really like a big drag. I remember this. This was the first book I read in 2025, or the first book I finished. And it was like the beginning, or like the first 2/3 felt like a drag. It was kind of a chore to get through it. But then the end I liked so much that, yeah, I think it's a great book. It's just the pacing didn't quite work for me. But that's not gonna. Barbara Kingsolver, I think I only read this by her. But I would be very much interested in reading more of her books. Oh, the Buddenbrooks. Yeah, I rated this a bit high. This is, in the German language, this is by far the most famous book by Thomas Mann. Way more popular than The Magic Mountain. That being said, I think I would pick The Magic Mountain any day over this. The Magic Mountain, when I first read it, it didn't completely click with me. It's one of those books that I felt a little bit indifferent about, but still I constantly think about it. And this book, I never ever think about. It's not a bad book by any means, of course. It's like this is the book where you kind of understand Thomas Mann's writing style. Very elegant, very spread out. He can just like kind of describe things over like a couple 100 pages, and it works. Definitely it works. but it's yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit outdated or something. Maybe it's getting a bit too old. It didn't, it just didn't scratch the itch that some of the other books scratched for me. Oh no, it's all tumbling down. Alright, next up. The Baron in the Trees. And this, someone drew on this with a ballpoint pen. Why would you do that? Well, maybe this is kind of a book that I think would work as a children's book. Definitely. It's a young baron, like a young rich kid with a high social status who one day climbs up a tree because he's like mad at his mom or something, and then he never touches the ground again for all of his life. And I think that's such a cool concept, and it works so well. I was like, man, how, I caught myself thinking, well, how is he gonna go to the bathroom? What is he gonna do in this situations? And my man Italo thought of everything. Like usually I was like, well, how is he gonna do this and that if he's only in the trees? And then a couple pages later he wrote about it. It does work. Next up, Friends by Hermann Hesse. This is still one of the relics of the time where I would just pick up everything I could get with this name on it, which I don't, honestly, I might start doing that again because it's all pretty good. This is a novel about friendship. I thought this was gonna be like a short story collection or something, but it's one novella. And it's not about, it's not really what I expected. It's not about like a nice friendship. It's more about like a challenging friendship and like the shift and power dynamics and stuff like that. But in that very like cozy, flowery Hesse way. Yeah, pretty cool. Not a very well-known novel of his, I think, but worth the read. Next up, Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. Some of these I was like, did I rate them too low or too high? Because some of the Murakamis I read this year are rated way higher than this one. But honestly, this wasn't that bad. This was quite a cool story, quite a sad story. Definitely one of his better books, about a man trying to reconnect with his friends and discovering a tragic secret. That's how I would write the blurb if I would have to do that. And I think that's enough said about it. It was good. Le Petit Prince by, I'm holding this the wrong way. It has the same cover as the back cover. I'm gonna keep doing that. By Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I thought this is kind of like a children's book classic. This is such a well-known book, with all the weird, like really quite weird, childish illustrations. And I don't remember ever really reading this before. I was familiar with some of the elements, but yeah, I just found this randomly one day and was like, you know what, you can read this in a day, And I did, and I liked it, and I don't think it's the best book ever written. I'm not crazy about it, but I definitely liked it. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. I rated this quite low. I don't really remember why. I didn't rate it higher. I think, I really like books that has children as protagonists. And a lot of people try, and a lot of people do not succeed. I think it's quite hard to write about children, or from the perspective of children in a realistic way. And she fucking nails it, man. I thought this felt so real. Like, it's, as a child, it's not all like rosy and nice. It's a struggle sometimes, especially as you get older. You compare yourself to others, you get jealous. I think the portrayal of kids was chef's kiss. And the whole story, I think, I don't know why I didn't rate this higher. I really quite liked this, and how children normalize everything. Like if they grow up in like a quite violent environment, you know, they don't even see it as like a negative thing because that's all they know and stuff like that. I think it went quite deep, and I do definitely. The weird thing is, you know, this is talked about so much, but I never heard anyone talk about the sequels. It has like 3 more parts, and I would like to read all of them, and I will obtain all of them at some point, and I'm probably gonna enjoy them. I think it features the same 2 characters through their whole life, and I think it. Maybe did she want to publish it as one big book? Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what she wanted to do. It's cool. Go read it. I think she's one of the great writers of our time, probably, after having only read one book of hers. Another great writer is Samuel Beckett. He really do be one of my favorite writers. And this is a lot of really weird short plays. This was a bit clunky to get through, honestly. But the way he wrote plays is unlike anything I've ever read. Like, he wrote plays for radio. He wrote plays where you need to pre-record stuff on audio and need to replay it during the play, which is, some of these plays are so extremely hard to perform. He has plays that feature almost no dialogue at all. This is so original and so creative, and it's amazing. Unfortunately, you cannot really ever go see them anywhere, really. You can find some recordings on YouTube, but I don't think any of his plays are really performed anymore. At least not plays that are in this, which I always think is kind of a shame when I read plays, because I like reading plays now. I used to be really against that, but most plays are not being performed anywhere, and you cannot ever go see them, which I think is kind of sad. We have another play next up. The second part of Goethe's Faust. I met a lot of people who liked the second part a lot more than the first part. And I think if I keep rereading this, and I need to learn more about this time that this was written in, the early 1700s. No, the early I don't know, the early 1800s. I don't remember quite when this was written. Who cares? The first part really blew my mind. It's coming up later. And this one I found a bit hard to get through. It was almost like fantasy, you know? And with all these historical characters and characters from from the Iliad and from the Odyssey. Quite cool. I think I would need to kind of like read a book about this play to really understand everything that's going on. Some people praise this as the absolute peak of all literature, you know? But I'm not quite there yet. The Eyes of the Eternal Brother by Stefan Zweig. This was great. This was, you know, kind of like an epic story about like 2 brothers. Felt kind of similar to Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. If you like that book, then I think you're probably gonna enjoy this. I really like Stefan Zweig. I really just wish he would have made his mind up about what kind of writer he wants to be, because all of his books are so different. He wrote like all kinds of different stuff, and it's really hard to find like a style or something. But this was a really cool little story. Another cool little story was Tonio Kröger. This is 2 stories, Tonio Kröger and Mario and the Magician by Thomas Mann. Tonio Kröger is also like a really, really one of my favorite short stories probably that I read this year. Which is also kind of auto-fictional, because did you know that Thomas Mann was half Brazilian? Did you know that? Maybe he was a quarter Brazilian, but his mom was from Brazil. And he kind of writes about what it was like growing up, being a mixed race kid and looking a little bit different than all the other kids, you know, in a fictionalized way. But very cool story. The second one I don't really even remember, to be honest, but it was not bad either. The Gambler by my man Dostoevsky. This is also a book that I read in December and I did not review formally yet. And I think I'll keep myself short because we have so much to get through still. It's already gonna be like, this is gonna be an hour-long video, but well, that's fine. You all read this probably, you know. This is a story about a man and his grandma or aunt or whatever, this old lady, and he kind of watches her become a gambling addict and lose all of her money, and they all become addicted to gambling, and I found it quite haunting because I have a very addictive personality, and I've never gambled before in my life, you know, but I could really feel like how you get into something and you're like, oh no, I can stop whenever I want, and then you can't, and then you keep doing it more and more, and you're never satisfied. You always need more and more and more, and I found it so tense and so haunting and so gripping. Great book, Dostoevsky, man, what can I say? This is one of the guys that is never overhyped. Dostoevsky, never overhyped, always worth the hype, even after 200 years. This, The Chinese Wall by Franz Kafka. I found this in like a used bookstore. This is the oldest book that I own. This is from 1948 or something. It's quite special. This is the original version published by Max Brod. It's pretty cool. It's probably one of my coolest books that I have. And it's stuff that is pretty rare to find. Like some short stories I've never even heard before. And he has a lot of aphorisms. And he's really good at writing aphorisms. A bird went looking for a cage. That's the one I remember. That's just one sentence. Yeah, man, this is really... There's a second part to this. Like more of these little random writings that were found after he died. But those are actually pretty hard to find. But I would even spend quite a bit of money on those if I would find them. Okay, next up. Atonement by Ian McEwan. This was sadly another case of overhyped for me. You know, a lot of people think this is one of the best books ever written, and I went in with expectations that were a little bit too high. Why does he always have covers where there's a child sitting on stairs? I think The Cement Garden has also a girl sitting on stairs, but that's beside the point. I filmed so much that I filled my SD card and I emptied my battery, so it's quite a bit later now. But that's fine. With this many books, it's fine to take a break. Next up we got Breast and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. A book that I was initially a bit conflicted about, and I had to think about it a little bit before I really appreciated it for what it was, because it's called Breast and Eggs and you have two stories. And I was like, well, those stories are like barely connected. They feature some of the same characters, but apart from that, they're not really connected at all. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. And I still think it's kind of this could have been two books, I think. But the more I think about it, the more I think it kind of works. So yeah, you have this story featuring the sister of the protagonist and the niece. And then you have the story where she's more of the actual protagonist and she thinks about artificial insemination to have a child by herself. It's quite deals with a lot of topics about femininity and womanhood and stuff, and I think it was very interesting to read that, especially from a Japanese perspective, you know. Definitely a cool book, cool author. Unfortunately, the German edition of this is hideous. The cover is absolutely terrible. This one I think is quite cool. I'm gonna give the German edition of this to a friend for her birthday, but don't tell her I said that. And then we got a weird one. We got Bats of the Republic by Zachary Thomas Dodson. This is more... I think this is more of an art piece than a classic novel. Very experimental concepts. Has a lot of artwork in it. I said it's a steampunk 1984, it says in my notes. I think that's cool. You have two different characters which are related. You have one set in the past, and well, one is writing from the past and one is writing from the future. And the actual author is kind of also a character in the book. And you have this futuristic story and this past story, and you have all these drawings and stuff. And I think he can get away with it, this man, Zachary Thomas Dodson. I think if you would judge the novel purely as a novel, I don't think the story is that interesting. Or it could have been more. But I don't think it really matters, because there's so much more to this concept-wise that I don't think it's... Yeah, it's okay. It's cool. It's not my favorite book ever, but it's definitely a really cool book. I had to hunt for this for ages. And then I finally got it, and then I didn't read it for 2 years. So this year I finally did. Coming up, the next category, we got Sputnik Sweetheart. This is the lesbian novel where one of them disappears, by Murakami. This was, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but the ending I thought was also kind of conflicting, but then you don't need to tie it's an interesting decision not to tie everything together in the end and kind of leave it open-ended. But I could appreciate that, and I think this is also one of his better novellas. Emilia Galotti, this is also something that some kids, well, maybe not anymore, but when I was a kid, some of us had to read this in school, and it was terrible and boring. And I don't think I could have appreciated this in school. It's very old. It's written in a very old-fashioned way. But I think this was actually really nice. A typical tragedy of that time. It's you had comedy and tragedy, and comedy is where it's like a good ending, and tragedy is where everybody dies in the ending. So if you read one of these, you already know what's gonna happen in the end, but that also kind of makes it interesting, how it's gonna get there and stuff. Yeah, cool story. We've got White Nights by Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. This was also really, I think it was Jack Edwards who kind of recreated a hype about this book. And I think it was great. I love Dostoevsky, but it's not the best. It's not even my favorite Dostoevsky, The illustrations in this are amazing and so weird and so haunting, and it's such a crazy choice to choose these illustrations, but I love it. I think that really elevates it, in my opinion. And yeah, it's a great novella. Very great. But yeah, also it's just that. And then we got the Wind-Up Bird Chronicles. I don't think I have a Dostoevsky. Don't think I have a Murakami higher than this. This was really my favorite Dostoevsky I read in a long time. This is a really, this is quite a big one of his bigger ones. This is coming in at about 600 pages, and it's not. It works. It kind of, everything is dragged out, and I also feel not a lot of stuff happens, and it has this melancholic sense of mundanity that a lot of his works have, and it really feels, it kind of feels like you kind of live in that book for a while. You take maybe like a month to read it, and you kind of exist in this world, in this barren old world. I think, yeah, this is, I don't know, probably peak Murakami. Is he doesn't go too heavy on the magical realism. It's, yeah, but it kind of appears occasionally, and I think that really works quite well. It's not as batshit crazy as 1Q84 or Kafka on the Shore, but it's pretty, yeah, it's probably in my top 3 Murakamis somewhere. And then The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea in this edition, that would be really beautiful if it would be so goddamn dirty. I think this always happens in storage. I think this is because, you know, the Medimops books, they all have like this sticker on the back, and then they store it like this, and then the ink rubs off, and that's why they all have this gross stain on there. But this book was amazing. This was, I want to reread Confessions of a Mask next year, because I don't think I really got into that as much as I wanted to. But this whole persona of Yukio Mishima, how it kind of comes through in his literature, I find him utterly fascinating. Unfortunately, a lot of his books are quite hard to get here in Germany. He's not really in print anymore, as far as I can tell. And I really want to read a lot more of his stuff, but I'll need to get my hands on the books first, which is quite a challenge, but I do like a challenge. So yeah, hopefully I can read the horses, the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, or whatever it's called. I really want to read all of his works. So yeah, now my 5-star books, I'm gonna leave you on a cliffhanger there. That's gonna be a separate video. As I said, also my non-fiction and my rereads. So this is the last portion of the books, like the 4.75 stars ones, and I'm gonna go through them now. We got Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I think the main element of this is like the twists and turns and the plot twists. I think it's quite cool. If you take that element away, I don't think it quite holds up, but it's definitely a great story. And you kind of, I don't know, I'm looking for something to compare it to, but I can't think of anything. But it's gonna leave you with your mouth open quite a few times, probably. We got Eva Luna by Isabel Allende, who is an author that I think we should all talk about more. I read The House of Spirits many years ago. That's also up for a reread, I think. But this was such a well-told story. Just like the pacing of it felt very, very natural and genuine. And she uses a lot of folklore elements and a lot of foreshadowing in like a magical realist way. I think you can compare her to Garcia Marquez. She even kind of compared herself to him. He got way more famous than she did, but she was also really famous a couple of decades ago. So this is a great book. I think you should read it. Fight Club. That was a big surprise by Chuck Palahniuk that I really did. For this one, I kind of had low expectations because when I was a teenager, I watched the movie pretty much religiously, many times, and I always heard that people liked the book more than the movie, and I think even Chuck Palahniuk himself thought that the movie was better, so I didn't expect too much, but surprisingly I really did like it, and I like that it really especially towards the end, it went into quite a different direction than the movie, as more like a political activist kind of movement, and I think that was really cool, and I think it's an underrated book. It's a perfectly rated movie, I think, but I do think it's an underrated book. And then a really cool discovery, like one of my new authors that I discovered this year that I like a lot, Chingiz Aitmatov, Frühe Kraniche, Early Cranes, or When the Cranes Fly South, or something like that, I think is the translation. It has been translated, I think. I just couldn't find it, but someone said in the comments of my review that this had been translated. So you can read it. That's great. This author is from Kyrgyzstan, and this is a novella about basically life in the times of the Second World War in the steppe in the Kyrgyzstan like land where there's just like great old plains and nothing, and how the life is there, especially like for a teenager. I think that was quite interesting, and it's funny because I heard a German booktuber called Kain und Abel talk about this book, and then 2 days later I found it randomly in this same edition. This is also this. If you look at it closely, these cranes, they're upside down, so it kind of belongs this way. This is probably my favorite book cover of this year. And since then, I just kept finding Chingiz Aitmatov books everywhere. I think these are not in order, but I think I have 2 or 3 more that I just randomly found that I picked up. Yeah, amazing, great book. Then the 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. I just finished Catcher in the Rye today, and I'm still in the J.D. Salinger spirit, kind of. These were great. These are some of the best short stories I read in like ages. This man really, really knows how to write children characters. I think almost everything that everything that I read by him so far features children as characters, and he's also one of those guys who's really good at that, and it really works, and these stories are great. Sadly, the book is almost completely destroyed. It's in very poor condition, but yeah, it's probably I don't think this will survive a reread, so if I ever want to reread these, I think I'll get a new one, but still I'll keep this like on the shelf. Alright, Homo Faber by Max Frisch. This is my favorite author that I discovered this year, even though I kind of rediscovered him. I didn't really discover him for the first time. We did have to read this one in school, but I don't think I even finished it. Maybe. I don't think I read it, because for most of the book, it felt like, well, if I read it in school, that was probably like 13 years ago, but still I couldn't remember the story at all. And also, I don't think you should read this in school. This is not a story that a teenager can really relate to at all, I think. If anything, it features like a teenage girl that he has or like a young adult girl. I think she's of age, that he has an affair with, that he later randomly finds out it's his own daughter. Quite fucked up, but it's also about a whole lot of other things. It's kind of a little bit of everything. It kind of has that auto-fiction element that I really like, that Max Frisch seems to also write in a lot of his stuff. Yeah, great book. Kind of fascinating to read, also kind of timeless. I kept forgetting that this was set in the 50s and written in the 50s, because it felt a lot more modern. But yeah, I highly recommend. Schmetterlinge by Hermann Hesse. This was kind of a surprise. Well, I love Hermann Hesse, but these compilations are usually nothing to write home about, But this one had some of my favorite Hesse poems that I've never read before. This had quite a lot of new stuff to me, and I had a blast reading this. I read this also in like 2 days or something. It's also like in very big print. And I just had a really, really good time reading this book. And I love butterflies. And I even have a butterfly tattoo now. It's not because of this book, but I like butterflies. What can I say? Okay, The Class by Hermann Ungar. This was one... Well, I kind of fell into this like kind of rabbit hole of these writers, mainly Jewish writers from Prague, kind of exactly at the same time as Franz Kafka was writing, but he wasn't even really part of those guys. But yeah, it's like a kind of a niche movement that I discovered this year, and that I have obtained some books. Ernst Weiss was writing there, Klabund was writing, and they called the group 1925, and I think they just wrote for a couple of years and then they kind of disbanded, and it wasn't even really a thing, I think. But Hermann Ungar, man, I read another one of his books last year, The Maimed, and I loved it. And this one, oof, yeah, amazing. It's about a teacher who just gets the biggest anxiety ever teaching his class, and he thinks they all want to kill him and his pupils, and they really don't, you know, they're just kids. And it's about paranoia and psychosis and anxiety, and it really makes you kind of feel all those things too, but like in a good way, if that makes sense. Highly, highly, highly recommend if you can get your hands on this. This is an author that is almost forgotten, I think. It's not easy. Well, this is the easiest one to get, but all of his other stuff, he only wrote 2 novels, and all of his other stuff, his short stories and other writings, it's almost impossible to get. But it's kind of a shame. It's really quite a shame. He also, like Kafka, he died really early in his life. And he just never really wrote more, so all I can do is just reread these 2 books for all eternity, I guess. The Brothers Karamazov. I will, right off the bat, I will tell you, literally the only reason why I didn't give this 5 stars is because of the blurb. Because whoever, I kind of want to send an angry letter to whoever was in charge of writing this, because this just completely spoils the ending of this book. I mean, for like a big 1,000-page novel almost, I don't know, over 1,000 pages actually, I don't think it matters as much as for like a proper crime novel. But despite all things, this is still a crime novel, and I don't want to know who the murderer is from reading the blurb. I think that, fuck you, honestly, fuck you to ever did that. That kind of ruined a part of the experience for me, because I knew the whole time who did it, because I read the blurb before reading the book. But yeah, I think people have talked about this plenty of times. A lot of people have done a better job than me. Read this. This is one of the best books ever written, in my opinion. And that is a nice transition to the 5-star books. My favorite books of this year, which you're probably gonna see maybe the day after you see this, hopefully, if everything works according to plan. So stay tuned for that. Let me know, man, my voice is already like really strained and scratchy. Haven't been talking this much for a long time. But yeah, this is, I want to do this every year. It's so much fun. Thank you so much again to everybody who is like a part of this channel, to all the people who comment regularly. I wish I would know your real names, you know, and it feels weird addressing you by all your usernames, but you are appreciated. It's always a blast. It's always nice to have familiar accounts comment on my videos, you know. So yeah, have a happy New Year, a good New Year's Eve, and thank you to everybody who supports this channel. On to 2026. Let's see what the new year brings. Goodbye.